So thanks for stopping by to check out this episode of Vintage Audio Review. So what piece of audio gear have you owned the longest? And let's not count records, cassettes, or 8-tracks if you have any. For me, it is a pair of Klipsch LaScala Loudspeakers, of which this is one of them. In the summer of 1980, I purchased a pair of Klipsch Loudspeakers from Jerry's Audio right here in Tucson. I paid $1,700 for the pair, which would be about $6,100 in today's money according to the inflation calculator. That was an awful lot of money for a college student to spend on a pair of loudspeakers, or actually spend on anything other than maybe a car back then. So why did I want to buy a pair of industrial loudspeakers, which were more expensive than the normal Klipsch LaScala loudspeakers? In order to get that answer, I will go back in time the year before, when I worked as a co-op student, which would be an intern in today's terminology, at a small military town in southern Arizona. During the day from about 8 to 5, I worked as an electrical engineering intern student, and quite by accident, I ended up DJing at a local nightclub, which fed my passion for audio gear even more. The co-op program only lasted for a semester or about 6 months, and so the following year I ended up co-oping again at that same base, and I also got another DJing job, this time at another nightclub. At this point, I decided that I really liked DJing when I was not DJing at a nightclub, and thought it would be a good idea to have a portable DJ business. I decided it would be a good idea to put together a sound system that would be really cool to have, and that would allow me to DJ parties back when I was at school, which ultimately led me to purchase these industrial LaScalas over the normal LaScalas. And you'll see why when we do a little tour around the speaker here in a minute. The other speaker is in another room, and I wasn't going to drag them out for measurements because they weigh about 150 pounds each. Speaking of dimensions, they're about 24 inches wide by 24.5 inches deep by 35.5 inches tall. So they're not the easiest thing for one person to move around. I had to have a friend come over, Aaron, to help me move the speaker so I could do some measurements, which you'll see in a little bit. So in 1980, I put together this DJ system with the help of the salesman at Jerry's Audio, and I have had it ever since. There was a period of time where I foolishly wanted to sell it, and thank heavens my wife talked me out of it. So while going over old photos, I noticed that the LaScalas are in a lot of pictures throughout the years, and I don't think I will ever part with them. In fact, I believe my youngest son wants them when I no longer can enjoy them. So that being said, I wanted to describe a little bit about how they sound. They're extremely efficient, as you'll see from the data. They can be very loud with just a watt or two in them. In fact, I generally don't require more than about 2 watts to drive them. So you tube amp people, this is a great speaker for you. The speakers are not in the optimum position by any means in the room that they are in now. However, being in the corners of the room, it does help boost the bass, which is a little low on the LaScalas, if you can believe that, and you'll see that in the data. I really enjoy sometimes just cranking back and listening to LaScalas, and a lot of times it can sound like the people right there. You just close your eyes and you can hear CD, the Diana Krall, the girl in the other room CD. That really sounds great on the LaScalas, as does a lot of other music, but that one just came to mind. You just close your eyes and she's right in front of you singing. It's just a very nice sounding, efficient speaker. And a lot of people don't like horn speakers, but these sound really good to me. I have never had any problems with the LaScalas that I am aware of, other than the fact you usually need 2 people to move them around. I did have to refinish the top. You'll notice that it's glossy, and the reason for that is we had plants above and the water dripped, and over time it kind of caused the paint to peel up, and so I refinished the top and put a lacquered kind of finish on it. But that's not really a problem with the speaker so much as us not paying attention to where water dripped out of the plant. In case you're wondering, these do have the original crossovers and drivers in them. So here is a better view of my Klipsch Industrial LaScala speaker. Now it's actually an LSI version which had the textured black paint finish with aluminum trim and die-cast corner protectors and handles. The actual dimensions are 35.5 inches high by 24.75 inches deep by 24 inches across, and as I mentioned earlier, it weighed in at 151 pounds. It has 3 drivers: the tweeter, which is here, and that's a K77 horn tweeter. It has the mid-range here, which is a K55 mid-range, and then behind this folded horn area, it's called, is the K43 15-inch woofer. So that's kind of the makeup of the speaker, and we'll go around here. So you can see the top here has more, it's a gloss finish as opposed to the finish here, and that was where water from plants had got on it and kind of ruined the finish, and I refinished it with a gloss finish. Here we have one of the side handles. There's obviously one on each side. They're pretty heavy duty, and it really makes moving this thing around much, much easier. And you can see all the corner protectors and the edges on the side, and those have held up excellent over all the years. So here we have the speaker binding post connection, 5-way banana jack style, and we do have a fast blow fuse here for protection, and we have different specs for the speaker as well. And on the other side here is the other handle. So that's kind of the quick tour. The first thing I measured on the LaScala was its speaker impedance using the QA402 analyzer, and that is this lower chart here. So figure 3 was from the owner's manual spec sheet that I got on the LaScala back in 1980. So if we compare the two, we can see that we were reading an impedance of, or they were reading an impedance of 25 ohms at 50 hertz, and we're reading about 58 ohms at 50 hertz. So we're about a little bit more than double the impedance. Also, you can see that the overall slopes kind of follow the same shape after all these years. And if you look at the 5 kilohertz mark on the original data sheet, it was at 8.1 ohms. At 5 kilohertz, which is right here, this point right here, we have a 7.81 ohms. So it's only 0.3 of an ohm different 42 years later. So that's pretty nice. This peak, I was told by my speaker nerd friend Dan that could be caused by a decrease in the dampening in my cabinet, which could be related to a driver or the dampening material padding that may have just aged over time. And it's not really a concern because it's a higher impedance and it's not going to be a problem for an amplifier. Also, this lower limit is 4 ohms, so we're never going to have an impedance less than 4 ohms across the band. This plot is the same as the previous one as far as impedance, but in this case I am also showing the phase. There was no reference from previous data from Klipsch as to what the phase plot looked like, but here it is. Now we're going to look at some frequency response of the LaScalas, and in order to make them, I used a program called REW, or Room Equalization Wizard. It's a free program, and I will provide a link to the program in the description below. I would recommend donating to them. Also, you would need a calibrated microphone, and information on which of those will work with their program are on their website. So the first response we're going to look at, this one here in red, this guy right here, this was made with the microphone 1 meter away from the face of the speaker and at a height that placed it right between the tweeter and the mid-range horn. It's called a bore sight measurement because I'm directly in the center of the speaker, and in order to make sure I am as close to the center as possible, I use this laser level, which I remove once I'm set up. The microphone was placed 1 meter away, and the power to drive the LaScala was 1 watt into 8 ohms. Across the x-axis, we have our frequency. There's 20 hertz, and here's 20 kilohertz. For the vertical axis, we have sound pressure level. It goes up 110 dB to 65 dB SPL. Our frequency response varies quite a bit. A lot of this up and down stuff is because of the room acoustics. It's, I said, a room with reflections and all that. However, if you look here, this is 100 dB SPL at 1 meter. That's pretty darn loud. That's a very efficient loudspeaker. And I kind of just drew that in. You can see we got peaks above it and below it, but it's really not so bad. And even at this point here at 60 hertz, we're already at 95 dB SPL, which that's very efficient. Anything close to 90 dB SPL right here, if I come over here, that's at 55 hertz. So basically we're looking around 55 hertz, and we're still at 20 kilohertz, we're at 88. So that's not too bad. So that is at 1 meter away. Now I took a measurement where I moved the microphone still 1 meter away, but I was 27 degrees off axis. So I was kind of to the right in this case, and that's the yellow line. So if I moved it 27 degrees off center, I get the yellow trace, and you can see there's a loss in the high end a little bit in this area right here. We lost a few dB in the high end, and that's kind of to be expected, but basically it's pretty good. Then I moved the microphone so that it was 1 meter away, but minus 27 degrees off axis. In this case, minus would be to the left. We'll go ahead and look at it, and it is it's highlighted in yellow. So at minus 27 degrees, it kind of followed pretty much the bore sight, but it still was a little less, but not as bad as the plus 27 degrees. The reason the two are probably different is maybe I wasn't so accurate in my positioning of the microphone, but still it's pretty close. From let's just pick this spot right here. So that's 106, and if I come down here, 103, so it's about a 3 dB change is all from going off axis at about 14 kilohertz. So that's pretty efficient. The last measurement I made on the LaScalas was this one here, measuring the SPL at 10 feet with 1 watt input, and the requirement is 96 dB plus or minus 5 dB from 45 to 17,000 hertz. So this is that plot. This line here is the 96 dB mark. So we obviously have points above and below it. The lower limit would be 91 dB, which would be this line going across here. So if we look at that, we can see from 45 hertz, we're definitely below the line. We're pretty good once we get to about almost 70 hertz. And then for the most part, we're above that, except for this little place here. We're down about 2 dB. And here we're at 82 dB. So we're down 9 dB at that point. If we come to 17 kilohertz, you can see that we're at 89 dB. So we're not that far away. We're actually right at 90 dB. So we're only a dB off at 17 kilohertz from the requirement. On the other hand, if we go plus 5 up from 96, that would bring us to 101, which would be this line across here. And you can see there's only a few places that exceed that. Right here, we're off by about a dB, maybe a dB here, and we're off at this peak around 200. We're off at 106, so we're a little over a dB away from the limit there. So right here at 194 hertz, we're at 106 dB SPL, so we're off 5 dB at that point. So that's our worst spot. But for the majority of the band, we are within the plus or minus 5 dB window. Now that's a pretty efficient speaker. To be at 10 feet away, you're at an SPL that is very high. And for comparison, I will show you my KEF speaker. So this is this blue one, These are my KEF, this is one of my KEF reference speakers, and just a speaker without the cube equalizer thrown in. And you can see while it does have a lot of bass, it has nowhere near the efficiency. So in my opinion, the Klipsch LaScala has a fairly good response. It's probably meeting the spec requirement, I'd say at least 90% of the time at 10 meters. So the lower frequency response of the LaScala is not as good as some others, which is a little surprising because it's such a large speaker. However, if you look at this point right here at 90 dB SPL, which is fairly good, and remember, we're 10 feet away and it's still pretty darn good, but that's at 65 hertz, and the bass response rolls off from there. One of the things you'll hear about on the LaScalas is that they do lack a little bit in the very low frequency part of the band, and you can see from the data that they are indeed a bit lacking. My LaScalas are in the corners of the room that I listen to them in, so the bass response is definitely enhanced, and I really don't need a subwoofer, but I do have one that I could switch in for certain music that I want a bit more bass out of. So anyway, this 42-year-old LaScala still seems to be doing pretty well. If I had more energy and wanted to pull the other one out, I'm sure I would get a very similar response. But for now, we'll just look at the one. So the oldest photograph I could find showing a LaScala in it was this poor quality Polaroid from February of 1981, so I'd owned the system maybe 9 months, and it shows my friend Lois, who was maybe 5'5" and 120 pounds, posing comfortably on a LaScala. I don't think there are too many speakers that you could do that with. This next LaScala picture was taken in the summer of 1981 while I was attending summer school at the University of Arizona, and I was staying in the Apache Santa Cruz dormitory. You can see that on top of the LaScala there is a 13-inch color TV. It did have vacuum tubes though. Also, you can see the rest of my system, including the 2 turntables, a mixer, cassette deck, a DBX subharmonic synthesizer. I think it's a Model 100. There was also some Sennheiser headphones and a Kenwood tuner, I believe. Also of note is the cube in the center of the stand, which is a Carver M400 amplifier, which powered my system. And the Carver M400 will be part of another video at some future point. I still have that stand. It does disassemble, and the LaScalas I still have. Oh, and that little Simi Winery 45 holder, I still have that and the 45s that are in it, and I have many of the same records and the same cassettes. Not that I'm a pack rat or anything. So this photo was taken just a few weeks after the previous photo we looked at, and the reason I can tell is there is a TAC X10R reel-to-reel tape deck. Boy, I wished I had that still. As well as my new amplifier, which is the Sound Craftsman MA5002, which replaced the Carver M400. If I ever did a video on things that I wished I kept, these would be 2 of the 3, the third being a Sansui 8080 dB receiver. So this photo was taken in September or October of 1981, and this is inside my dorm room in Navajo Hall, which I shared with a fellow named Rob, who I'm still friends with. And you can see that the one LaScala is on top of his dresser. So I was very fortunate to have a roommate that let me put a speaker on top of his dresser, and the other one was on my side of the room on my dresser. The black thing that looks like a table is actually the cover for my portable DJ stand. This photo was taken around September of 1982 and shows a partial view of one of the LaScalas inside a dorm room at Navajo Hall, where I was now an RA, so I had a room all to myself. The nice thing about LaScalas is they can also act as a nice stand for cassette tape cases. And in case you are wondering, that is not me in the picture. That is a dorm resident whose nickname, surprisingly, was Sloth. So this photo was taken in October of 1982 and shows yours truly DJing a rather large party for Graham Greenlee Dorn and putting the LaScalas to the use they were intended. This photo was taken in the spring of 1983 and shows the Klipsch LaScala being used as a stand for a lamp as well as a few knickknacks. That is my friend Clado on the couch, and this was taken in the first apartment I moved into after I graduated college. This photo was taken in April of 1984, and here we have the LaScala being used as a stand for a small refrigerator. Go figure. You can also see the Simi Winery 45 case as well as part of the TIAC X10R, which I still wished I had. So we move ahead several years in the life of the LaScalas, and in this picture, which was taken around 1998, maybe 1999, we see the LaScalas being used as a stand for part of my stereo. The only components that I still have of that group of equipment are the Nakamichi tape deck and the Go Video DVD VCR combo unit. And of course I have the stand that all that gear is in and that cassette holder at the top of that stand. As well as that speaker in the corner I still have. Those were NHT speakers. For our last photo going down LaScala memory lane, we have one from October 2008. And here we see the LaScala being used as a stand for both a 1950 Philco TV set as well as a Fisher 400 FM receiver, which I forgot would have been something I would have added to my list of things that I shouldn't have sold. What prompted this whole video on the LaScala was that TV set I removed a few weeks ago from the LaScala so I could do some repairs on it because it still worked, or it worked well enough that it just needed a tune-up. And so while it was off, I decided it would be a good time to go ahead and do this video on the LaScalas. I really hope you enjoyed the little montage of photos that I put together on my LaScalas. And once again, I thank you for watching, and I hope you will leave a comment as to what piece of audio gear you have owned the longest. And if you have not subscribed, please do so, and have a great day or night.